On the day my son was born, the elders of the Gu family gathered in the ancestral hall to announce that he would be the next heir to the Gu group. But at that moment, Jason entered with Vivian and her son. The heir to the Gu group can only be my son with Vivian. I looked at him in disbelief. Jason, what do you mean? Jason turned to me and sneered, with your chaotic private life, who knows if the son you gave birth to is even mine? After saying that, he waved his hand, and hundreds of photos fluttered down, scattering across the Gu family ancestral hall. In the photos, I was dressed provocatively, leaning against various men while drinking, appearing intimately close with each one. Every image looked utterly disgraceful. The Gu family elders pointed at me and hurled insults. I let out a cold laugh and dialed Jason's archrival. I've thought about what you said last time, but my salary needs to be 3 times what it is at the Gu group. I calmly finished speaking, but Ethan on the other end sounded excited, his voice even changing pitch. Is this for real? You're not messing with me, are you? I lowered my head to look at the photos scattered on the ground and my son in swaddling clothes, a bitter smile tugging at my lips. Why would I mess with you? I'm serious. After hanging up, I immediately called my lawyer to draft a divorce agreement. Then, I found a reputable postpartum care center. Having just given birth, my body was at its weakest, so I needed to recover properly. As for Jason and Vivian, I would settle accounts with them one by one once I was well. Upon arriving at the postpartum center, I had my assistant take my son to change his name from Marcus to Nathan. My assistant was shocked upon hearing this. Anna, have you really thought this through? The young master is the child you and Jason finally hoped for after so much effort. Maybe there's just a misunderstanding between you two? My son was conceived after multiple IVF attempts, and the hardships involved were known only to me. When the doctor told me it was finally successful, I was so excited that tears streamed down my face. Jason was also overjoyed. He held me and whispered promises in my ear repeatedly. Wife, you've worked so hard. From now on, you're the greatest contributor to our Gu family. Once the child is born, I'll hand over the Gu group to him, making him the youngest heir. But how long had it been before he suddenly had another son out of nowhere? Since Jason had broken his word, my son naturally had no relation to him anymore. This is my son, the precious one I brought into the world with all my strength. I must secure the best for him. I closed my eyes. My heart calm as still water. Just do as I say, you don't need to worry about the rest. After my son's name was changed, I finally breathed a sigh of relief. Just as I was about to lie down and rest properly, a message popped up on my work account. It was from Jason. Vivian will be my secretary starting tomorrow. Approve the contract. Looking at the message, I smiled self-mockingly and slowly scrolled through the screen. All the messages above were ones I had sent to Jason, but none had received a reply. This time, he proactively messaged me only for Vivian's sake. This Vivian really had impressive skills. In just 2 years, she went from a minor receptionist at the Gu group to the personal secretary of the Gu group's president. Just as I was about to close my phone, it buzzed twice more. This time, it was photos from Vivian. In the photos, Vivian was wearing sexy lingerie, her eyes seductive, kneeling on the bed. Seeing the message, I subconsciously frowned. The next second, she recalled it. Immediately after, she sent another message. Sorry Anna, I sent it by mistake. These photos were meant for my husband. You didn't see them, did you? Jason asked me to find you to approve my contract. Where are you? I'll come over now. I replied to her, if there's anything, contact my assistant, I'm busy. Couldn't I see through her intentions? Since she treats Jason like a treasure, I'll let her have him. After all, there are plenty of men. I submitted my resignation application. I thought Jason wouldn't hold me back. After all, he probably couldn't wait for me to leave the Gu group so he could openly be affectionate with Vivian at the company. But I didn't expect that as soon as HR signed off, Jason rushed over in a rage. He was dressed in a black suit, his brows furrowed coldly, his peach blossom eyes filled with frost, staring intently at me. Anna, what are you fussing about now? Where's the contract I asked you to approve for Vivian? Don't you know how important that contract is to Vivian? What do you mean by holding it up? I lazily lifted my head to look at him. Jason, get this straight. I'm no longer an employee of the GU Group. I have no obligation to work for you. Jason was stunned upon hearing this. He looked at me in disbelief. Anna, are you crazy? You're leaving the GU Group? His brows knitted tightly, his tone carrying a hint of panic. No, I don't agree. It was only then that he glanced at me twice and belatedly realized I was in postpartum recovery. He took a deep breath, softening his tone. Anna, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to be harsh with you. You've just given birth, so it's normal for your emotions to be unstable. I shouldn't argue with you at this time. At this point, he took out a gift box from behind and placed it in front of me. I slowly turned around, my gaze falling on the box. Jason opened it, revealing an exquisite butterfly pendant inside. I let out a cold laugh and turned away. I had seen this pendant on Vivian's Facebook. 2 days ago, it was still around her dog's neck. This is the apology gift I prepared for you. I turned back, gazing straight at him, trying to find a trace of guilt or unease in his eyes, but there was none. Anna, listen to me, my child with Vivian was just an accident. The words I said in the GU family ancestral hall that day were entirely to compensate Vivian. I couldn't let the child be born without a father. I hope you can understand me. Handing over the GU Group to him was just because I pitied the mother and son, but rest assured, my heart and love are with you and our son. And those photos, don't overthink them, I absolutely trust you. If I hadn't done that, the GU family elders would never have agreed to let How become the heir. Vivian is different from you, you're so capable that even without the GU Group, you'll do well. But Vivian isn't. Without the GU Group, she and her son as a widow and orphan wouldn't survive. After saying this, he cautiously glanced at me. I clenched my fists tightly, my nails almost digging into my palms. Every word from Jason was like an invisible knife, wildly slashing at my already shattered heart. For Vivian, he didn't hesitate to damage my reputation, publicly claiming our son wasn't his, all to make it easier to hand over the GU Group to Vivian and her son later. He could go to such lengths for Vivian. If I didn't fulfill his wishes, it would seem like my fault. I tightened my fists and took a deep breath. I understand you. Jason seemed to sigh in relief, his gaze toward me carrying a bit more apology. Rest assured, I won't mistreat you and our son. The next day, Jason didn't go to the company. He said, the company isn't busy, I'll stay here with you and our son for these 2 days. This time, I didn't object. After all, he wouldn't be able to see his son anymore in the future. During this time, aside from handling the employment contract Ethan sent me, I spent the rest of the time resting properly. Jason was constantly amusing our son, preparing formula for him, changing diapers, as if he were truly a qualified father. Seeing this scene, I was momentarily dazed. Once upon a time, this was my life. But all of it was just an illusion. Vivian called Jason several times, but he hung up each time. He seemed to truly dedicate all his time to me and our son. Even he, who rarely cooked, specially made a pot of chicken soup for me to ease our relationship. The aroma of chicken soup wafting from the kitchen made me nauseous. I don't like chicken soup, and Jason had always known that. But after meeting Vivian, he forgot. When the chicken soup was served, Jason's phone rang again. He hesitated and glanced at me, but ultimately chose to answer the call. I don't know what was said on the other end, but I heard Jason say, "Don't worry, I'll come right over." After hanging up, Jason grabbed his coat without a word and headed out. At the door, he seemed to remember something, returned to the kitchen, and picked up the prepared thermos. Watching this series of familiar actions, I couldn't help but redden my eyes. Jason, oh Jason, your attempts to make up are always so clumsy and unnecessary. Watching him about to close the door, I couldn't hold back and said, "Our son has a bit of a fever, could you stay with?" Before I could finish, Jason coldly interrupted, "Vivian has something going on, I need to go help. If there's anything here, call the nanny." Watching his retreating figure, a sour feeling rose in my throat, and my eyes grew warm. Yes, when Vivian has an issue, he goes personally. When I do, he tells me to call the nanny. Can a nanny replace a child's father? Half an hour later, Vivian updated her Facebook. Someone said that me being hungry is a big deal. Below the caption were several photos of Jason feeding her soup. He looked focused, she appeared happy, the two seemed so well matched. I stared at the photos for a long time until laughter came from the door, then I slowly placed my phone face down on the bed and looked toward the entrance. It was Vivian, arm in arm with Jason, entering. She was dressed elegantly, her long wavy hair cascading down her back, her face made up exquisitely. Seeing me look over, she pulled a smile and walked in. "Anna, I insisted Jason bring me to see the child, you don't mind, do you?" I stared at her for a long while before slowly saying, "The child is still young and can't be exposed to cosmetics." Perhaps not expecting this, she paused, then said, "Jason and I picked out 2 outfits for the child, we'll just look at him and leave, don't worry." Vivian pretentiously picked up the clothes and walked to my son. "Here, this is what Aunt Vivian specially bought for the little treasure. Children grow fast, so they need new clothes often, Aunt will buy them for you from now on, okay?" I frowned at the clothes in her hand. They looked like cheap street goods, with dull colors, threads everywhere, and no tags. Recalling the day I saw Vivian's son in the GU Ancestral Hall, he was wearing designer custom clothes, a set worth as much as an ordinary person's house. I let out a cold laugh looking at her, then snatched the clothes from her hand and threw them on the ground. "My son is precious, he can't wear cheap street goods. Take them away." Vivian's face stiffened, standing there awkwardly. Jason, unusually, lost his temper and roared at Vivian, "I told you to buy clothes, and you buy this?" Vivian was scolded to tears. "Jason, I didn't know what brand the little treasure wears." After saying that, she ran out sobbing. This time, Jason didn't chase after her but stayed. "Anna, it was my oversight." Seeing me silent, Jason didn't say more. He turned and instructed his assistant to deliver dozens of sets of luxury brand clothes and toys. "These are all for our son, see if anything's missing and tell me." I smiled and agreed to each one, considering it as compensation as a father to his son. "Jason, stay here today and accompany our son." Tomorrow was our son's 1-month milestone, and also the day I would leave Jincheng. This month, although Jason came often, he was always called away by Vivian. The time he spent with our son was countable on one hand. Upon hearing this, Jason looked somewhat guilty. He reached out to touch my head, but I dodged sideways. He awkwardly withdrew his hand and sat by the crib, watching our son. But in the middle of the night, Jason still left. When I woke up, he was already gone from my side, with only our son lying beside me, sleeping soundly. No need to guess, he was probably with Vivian now. I reached out to touch my son's cheek, my heart filled with apology. "Baby, I'm sorry, Mom can't give you a complete family." Our son seemed to sense my emotions, humming and rubbing against my palm. Jason didn't return all night. This time, without any hesitation, I packed up, had my assistant book the earliest flight, and left the items to be handed over at the front desk for Jason when he arrived. Watching the scenery outside the window gradually shrink, I closed my eyes. Goodbye, Jason. Goodbye to this unbearable past of mine. When Jason returned to the postpartum center after soothing Vivian's emotions, he didn't see me or our son. He searched several times but found no trace of us. He panicked immediately and rushed to the front desk to inquire about my whereabouts. The staff smiled politely and handed him a document. "Mr. Jason, are you looking for Miss Anna?" "Miss Anna has already left, this is what she asked me to give you." Jason took the document puzzled. Upon seeing the words "divorce agreement" on the cover, he froze in place. "Miss Anna said to sign this divorce agreement as soon as possible, and also..." The front desk glanced at him, hesitated, but continued. "Miss Anna asked me to tell you that the position of Mrs. Jason is now vacant. She wishes you and Miss Vivian 100 years of harmony and to have children soon." Upon hearing this, Jason's face instantly turned pale, his lips even trembling slightly. Anna, come out quickly." Jason's face was pale, his forehead covered in fine sweat, his eyes full of panic and unease. With trembling hands, he pushed open the bedroom door where I stayed. But the two familiar figures never appeared. Anna, I don't like this kind of joke. He murmured to himself as if consoling, staggering to the wardrobe and yanking it open. But it was empty, with only a few of my home clothes hanging there lonely. You must be angry, so you're hiding on purpose, right? He painfully grabbed his hair, curling up in the corner, his voice choked. Anna, I was wrong, I really know I was wrong. I shouldn't have left last night. At that moment, as if remembering something, he frantically pulled out his phone from his pocket and started dialing my number. Hello, the number you have dialed is powered off. He persistently dialed several more times, but no matter what, the other end always played the cold electronic tone. He collapsed on the ground, as if losing all strength, murmuring, Anna, how could you bear to abandon me? You clearly love me so much, how could you bear to leave me? Jason bought a large case of alcohol and sat under the dim yellow light, drinking bottle after bottle, as if it would never end. In his daze, he seemed to see my figure again. In a white dress, long hair over shoulders, a gentle smile on her face, slowly walking toward him. Excitedly, he hugged me, tears sliding down his cheeks, his voice choked, Anna, I knew you wouldn't leave me. After saying this, he lost consciousness, passing out drunk. But Vivian, standing beside him, took out her phone, snapped a photo of them sharing a bed, and sent it to me. Anna, what do you have to compare with me? Meanwhile, as the person involved, I was leisurely sitting in the office eating watermelon. Ethan sat weakly in my office chair, looking at my son with a lifeless expression. My son, crying, reached out his little hands, trying to grab Ethan's hair. Ethan had no choice but to hold my son vertically in his arms, sighing repeatedly, my dear lady, how about I hire a nanny for you? Your little cub is driving me crazy. I'm about to have a nervous breakdown because of him. Hearing Ethan's words, I leisurely put down the watermelon in my hand, turned around, and looked him up and down. TSK, he really did look more haggard lately. I chuckled lightly and patted his shoulder, all right, stop complaining. As a new employee joining, I'll give you, the boss, a big gift. I had the paparazzi release the photo Vivian sent me and instructed them to monitor Jason and Vivian's movements at all times. As soon as they dared to do anything excessive, the media would expose the news immediately. Jason, if you dare betray me, you must bear the backlash. I not only want them ruined and disgraced but also left with nothing. I scrolled through my phone, looking at the online comments cursing Jason and Vivian, and nodded satisfied. This first step was finally solid. Next, I just waited for the clients from the GU group to contact me proactively. After all, I was at least a vice president at GU previously, holding many client resources. And these clients were all won over by me, one drink at a time. Now that I've left, how could they continue cooperating with that amateur team at GU? As long as these clients follow me to the Shin Group, GU's bankruptcy won't be far off. I leaned back in my chair, leisurely sipping coffee, silently planning each next step. The day after this incident exploded, many clients who had previously worked with me at GU called one after another, saying they wanted to terminate cooperation with GU. I naturally agreed gladly and hinted on the phone that I had come to Shin, and if they still trusted me, they could follow me to Shin. Upon hearing this, all these clients agreed without hesitation. After all, they had cooperated with me for so many years and trusted my abilities greatly. In just a few days, the GU group's situation deteriorated rapidly. Stocks plummeted, old employees submitted resignations one after another, and followed me to Shin. Jason's company fell into an unprecedented crisis. He rushed around trying to salvage the situation, but nothing helped. For 2 consecutive days, he was blocked by paparazzi and reporters downstairs at the GU group. His hair had turned half white. But what gave him even more headache was yet to come. Seeing Jason recently overwhelmed and anxious, Vivian not only showed no understanding but cried and demanded status. Jason, our son is almost 3, when are you going to marry me? Do you want me and our son to be drowned in these people's spit? Jason, tormented by her, couldn't help roaring, Mary, 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 with what? Can't you see what the company has become? All you do every day is eat and shop with your girlfriends, what else can you do? Can't you do something useful? Vivian roared it like that, immediately reddened her eyes and cried aggrievedly, "Jason, how can you say that? I'm thinking for our son too. Do you really want to see our son called a little bastard?" But this time, no matter how Vivian fussed, Jason didn't soften or show any intention to marry her. Recently, Shin received a big project that required my personal follow-up. I was busy all day, sometimes working overtime until late at night. Ethan wasn't idle either, he handled company affairs for me while also taking care of my son. Surprisingly, Ethan was really good at childcare. He always made my son laugh heartily, making me, as the mother, feel inferior. I couldn't help teasing, "Ethan is so skilled at childcare, don't tell me you have a child?" Upon hearing this, Ethan's body stiffened suddenly, and the smile on his face disappeared. He quickly put down my son, explaining nervously, "How is that possible? I haven't even been in a relationship, where would a child come from?" However, I didn't dwell on this issue too much. After all, the most important thing right now was to bring down the Goo group. Didn't Jason want to give the Goo group to Vivian and her son? I'd like to see if they'd still want it once Goo became an empty shell. During this period, Shin was unstoppable. Many companies that originally cooperated with Goo switched to Shin. If Goo and Shin were once equal rivals, now Shin had the upper hand over Goo. Jason tried every means to inquire who the new vice president at Shin was. But Ethan protected me and my son well, so Jason found out nothing. During this time, he imitated whatever Shin did, copying moves, which recovered some reputation. But their funds were heavily depleted. Although they regained some image recently, it was all show with no substance. To crush them, the final straw was needed. So I had Ethan deliberately release the news that we were bidding for the land in the west of the city. As expected, once Jason learned of it, he took action. On the day of the auction, I went with Ethan. Sitting in the auction room, seeing Jason's confident look, I just wanted to laugh. The auction started, and prices soared. I capped the price at 300 million. But Jason, like a madman, kept raising, 310 million. 320 million. 350 million. From my understanding, I knew this was his limit. He couldn't afford more. I calmly said, 500 million. 500 million far exceeded the land's value. But I didn't care, because what I wanted was to leave Jason with no way out. To wage this price war with me, Jason had sold many assets and was now short on cash. I had Ethan step forward to buy Jason's shares in the Goo group. For this land, Jason gritted his teeth and agreed. But he didn't know this was a pit I deliberately dug for him. Because that land in the west was originally mine. I bought it for 50 million back then, precisely to deal with Jason. This land had no value. Ethan's eyes flickered as he looked at me, shrinking his neck. "I see now, don't provoke anyone but Anna." I smiled but said nothing. Without me, could Jason have gotten to where he is today? He really thinks he has immense abilities. It was just me paving the way for him, making his path smoother. Since he dared betray me, he must be prepared to pay the price. After Jason got the land, he eagerly started development. After all, having spent so much money, if he couldn't develop it, he'd lose big. Watching Jason busy like a dog every day while I leisurely sat in the office drinking coffee, such days were simply too enjoyable. Ethan sat across from me, a playful smile on his lips. "You're so sure Jason can't develop it?" I put down my coffee cup and looked up at Ethan. "That land is all rocks underneath, even the best engineers couldn't develop it." Jason thought that as long as he got that land, he'd make a sure profit, but he didn't expect that I had already set up a trap, waiting for him to fall in. When I bought this land initially, I had it surveyed. It's all rocks below. To develop it, unless you're the foolish old man himself, no one else can. Ethan looked at me, a flash of admiration in his eyes. "No wonder you're the partner I fancy." I saw Jason again a week later. Ethan publicly announced I was Shin's vice president and specially held a banquet for me. Just as I came out of the dressing room, I heard conversation from the nearby lounge. One of them was Jason. He was in a black suit, his hair seemingly styled, but still somewhat messy. At that moment, he stood before Ethan, head slightly bowed, in a humble posture. "Please, Ethan, help our goo group through this crisis." Ethan toyed with his wine glass and chuckled, "That depends on whether our vice president is willing to help you. After all, I'm just a hands-off boss now, only helping her with childcare." Jason paused, subconsciously turning to look at the door. Our eyes met. I was calm, but his were full of shock. "Anna, how are you here? Do you know how long I've been looking for you? Now Goo has big problems, come back with me now." I walked in slowly, sat beside Ethan, and glanced at him indifferently. Jason was about to speak again when Ethan laughed, putting his arm around my shoulders. "Mr. Jason, I'm afraid that's not possible." Jason's expression changed, urgently asking, "Why?" Ethan looked casual, his tone light, "Because Anna is mine." Jason's face turned extremely ugly. "Ethan, what do you mean?" Ethan chuckled lightly. "Mr. Jason comes to my shin group and wants to take away my company's vice president. Mr. Jason is quite humorous." Jason's face alternated between green and white, wanting to say something. At that moment, the lounge door was pushed open with a bang. Vivian entered, and upon seeing me, her face instantly showed anger. "Anna, what do you mean? You abandoned Jason without a word on one hand, yet entangle with him on the other. What exactly do you mean?" At this point, she looked at Ethan, urgently saying, "Ethan, this woman is crazy, she shamelessly clung to Jason before, now she's entangling you. Hurry and kick her out." Ethan glanced at her but didn't respond. It seemed talking to such a person was beneath him. I looked at Vivian indifferently and said, "Jason is now a client of our shin group. Is it strange for me to be here?" Vivian's expression froze, then she said, "Client? Anna, don't make me laugh, okay? With your skills, you can enter Shen? You must have used some underhanded means, climbed into Ethan's bed to get in." She looked at me disdainfully, her tone sharp and sarcastic. Ethan's expression cooled. "Jason, is this your attitude when asking for help?" Jason's face darkened. Vivian was spoiled and spoke without filter. Jason's face darkened. "Enough, Vivian, say less." But Vivian crossed her arms, looking indifferent. "What did I say?" "Jason, Ethan actually lets an ignorant little girl manage the company. Isn't that chaos? Anna wants us to beg her. I think she's doing it on purpose." Vivian wanted to say more, but this time Jason slapped her without a word. This was the first time Jason hit Vivian. Previously, no matter what she did, he turned a blind eye. She cried aggrievedly, "Jason, you actually hit me for this cheap woman. Do you really think she has the ability to help you?" Jason took a deep breath and roared at Vivian, "You think everyone is a vase like you? I know Anna's abilities." Vivian was unconvinced and wanted to retort, but Jason's eyes carried a warning. She had to suppress her anger, but her gaze toward me was full of resentment and malice. Jason grabbed my hand, begging bitterly, "Anna, come back with me. Goo needs you. I need you too." He was always proud, never so humble. I raised my hand and forcefully shook off his, causing him to stagger and almost fall to the ground. I looked down at him, my heart full of cold laughter. "Jason, where do you get the face to say such things? Back then, I used all my connections and resources, fully supporting you, to make you what you are today. But you? How did you treat me? You allowed Vivian to ruin my reputation and even wanted to give the Goo group I worked hard to build to Vivian and her son? Now that Goo is a mess, you still want me to go back and clean up the mess? Have you been in the position of Goo's president too long and can't see your own place?" Recalling those photos scattered in the Goo ancestral hall, I took a deep breath, my heart aching to the point of breathlessness. Back then, Jason and I were just naive kids fresh out of school. We had nothing, focused solely on starting a business, enduring any hardship. In the early days, with no clients or resources, I had to grit my teeth and step up. Accompanying clients drinking, singing, whatever demands they made, I endured. I'll always remember that winter when I drank to stomach perforation at a table and was rushed to the hospital. Jason hurried there and stayed with me for 3 days and nights. Back then, I thought we had truly turned hardship into sweetness. But now, those photos have become evidence for him and Vivian to slander me. I took a deep breath and walked in front of them. Jason, do as much as your abilities allow. Don't always think of shortcuts, or you'll eventually fall to your death. You're not worthy of me, and I don't fancy you. Let's not meet again. Oh right, I've changed our son's name. After saying this, I turned and left. Tonight, Shun was hosting a banquet with me as the protagonist, so naturally I had to appear. Jason wanted to chase out, but was stopped by Ethan. Over the past half year, Ethan had taken me to various occasions, introducing me to many people. At first, strangers saw me as just a woman and didn't give me face. But later, after witnessing my abilities, their attitudes turned 180 degrees. Sure enough, as soon as I entered the banquet hall, someone came over with a wine glass. Miss Anna, I've long heard of your outstanding abilities, now we finally have a chance to cooperate. Yes, Miss Anna, we hope you can take good care of our company's project. I held my wine glass and responded one by one. These people were all shrewd, previously indifferent to me, now fawning. But I didn't care, as long as the goal is achieved, the process doesn't matter. After the banquet, I encountered Jason again at the hotel entrance. Seeing me, he hurried over, wanting to say something. Ethan was about to act, but I shook my head. It seems what I said earlier wasn't clear enough, so now I'll make it clear once and for all. Jason, we're already divorced, don't appear in front of me anymore, don't bring unnecessary disturbances to my life. His eyes read, Anna, I was wrong before, give me another chance, okay? I looked at him calmly, not knowing when the once willful and proud youth became so humble. Well, now I stand too high, he must look up to me. I said expressionlessly, Jason, did you forget there's someone in your car? Go, don't make her wait too anxiously. After saying that, I turned to leave. He chased after, wanting to say more, but I looked into his eyes and said word by word, don't do things that make me look down on you. This sentence seemed to drain all his strength, he couldn't even stand steady. At this time, Vivian got out of the car, came to Jason's side, and coldly watched my departing back. A trash who rises by relying on men, what is she so proud of? Jason stood up from the ground, grabbed her wrist, his voice carrying some plea, Vivian, don't say any more. Vivian glared at him and shook off his hand, isn't what I said the truth? Isn't Anna just relying on her looks to seduce men everywhere? What? I say that and you feel sorry for her? Jason finally broke down, he pushed Vivian away, his eyes bloodshot, roaring, enough. Stop talking. Vivian was scared by Jason and stood stunned. I told you not to say any more, Anna isn't that kind of person. Jason looked at Vivian with bloodshot eyes, veins bulging on his forehead, looking as if he wanted to kill. The next second, Jason got into the car, slammed the accelerator, and drove toward Vivian. Bang! With a loud crash, Vivian's body flew out and smashed heavily onto the ground. Blood splattered, staining the ground red. Jason, as if losing all strength, slumped over the steering wheel. When the police arrived, Vivian had lost vital signs, and Jason was arrested on the spot. Upon hearing this news, I was sitting in the office, swirling my red wine glass. I leisurely took a sip, then picked up my phone and sent Ethan a message, we can acquire Goo now. But what I didn't expect was that Ethan's actions were so swift, and he gave me a huge surprise. When Ethan stood before me, handing over the Goo Group's acquisition contract, he looked serious, this was originally yours, now it's returned to its rightful owner. Then, a blush spread across Ethan's fair and clean face, he continued, I'm not good at coaxing girls, but I believe you can feel my intentions. Looking at the tall, handsome young man before me, I chuckled lightly, it depends on your performance. Ethan's eyes brightened, I'll perform well.